First of all, is it your observation that we are dealing with unprecedented frequencies, numbers, incidents of death? I mean, just the whole conversation about the 3 constables that were found in the Hennep's River has had me very, very, very jarred, just thinking about that. We hear of the earthquakes in other parts of the world that are taking thousands of people's lives. It's a big conversation in this country at the moment, the hurt that is in the hearts and minds of our Afrikaner Boere compatriots about the deaths of people in the farms. It's been very much on my consciousness, the death of people because of suffering of health. It's a big, big conversation, death and grieving, and it seems to contort our minds into a particular conversation in a way of thinking about life that is informed by this life-sapping reality called death and grieving. Talk to me about that. What's going on?
I'll start, Aubrey, by just highlighting a name for our planet that is given by the beings on higher planets. It is called Mrityu Loka. Mrityu means death, Loka means planet. So from the vantage point of the higher planes, this place seems like a place where everyone just at every moment, birth, death is happening. So it is a place where death is prevalent. Next is that now we're living in times where we get to know what's going on everywhere on earth. Because death has always been there, it's always going on, but now we're hearing more and more about it. And it is part of the machine to inform bad news. Bad news sell, bad news also keep people anxious, and then when people are operating from a state of fear and anxiety, it's easy to push them in a certain direction. Thirdly is that the period of the earth is also called the winter time, Kali Yuga. So the first season is Satya. There's long life, good health, spiritually and otherwise. And as the times move, then you come to the winter of the Earth's seasons. And there, duration of life is shortened. It is said, supposed to be about 100 years average, but that's not really being seen. So because also the age of Kali means impurity, whether in the food, in the water, in the sound vibrations that we hear. So plus the mentality is also impure, that diseases are manufactured. There's more death that is going on. And that it is all reported is what compounds the issue. Then everyone is burdened by this. But it's an advantage. Really? It's an advantage because when we don't consider our own mortality, then we are sidetracked and miss the opportunity to use the human form of life for a greater platform of existence. Meaning that if I don't consider that this will end, then I never think of the next chapter. So I tend to collide with death, unprepared, and within a consciousness that will recycle me back to this world of birth, death, old age, and disease.
You seem to be suggesting, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the ever-present scepter of mortality is what focuses our minds towards the divine. That without the constant threat of death, grieving, we would be forever sinking into even lower stages of debauchery?
Yes.
Is that what you say?
Yes. Actually, the wise, they put death in the forefront of their meditation. That helps to think of time as very valuable. that the human junction is actually an opportunity for great achievement in the evolution of consciousness of the spirit. So without that footnote in our lives, without that education, we think time is just to while away. And so this as sure as death means that you should think, between now and unknown time of death, what will I master?
So does that mean that death, I suppose that is what you're saying, but does that mean that death is hereby design, that it is something that is a necessary part of the path of mankind in order for us to have this, I suppose, this existential collision with the great master plan, the divine master plan?
Yes, it is part of this dimension of existence. And what's beautiful with it is that it is not an existential threat for the actual living being, the spiritual being. It's designed for the temporary container, the body that we have. Because when we enter the different bodies, through whatever womb or through eggs, through seeds, we take on this misconception that I am that body. And therefore then we lose our divine mission of spiritual awareness. We start to take on the mission of the gratification of the vehicle. And we enter this realm of also misidentifying each other based on how we are packaged, black, white, Indian. We create all these bodily identifications which add to the strain of life in this world.
Oh, but couldn't the higher being or the higher beings have chosen another way? I mean, there's a finality in death, you know, and the levels of grief that people feel sometimes push people to levels of insanity where there is no sense of being in touch with reality. But even more insidious and more dangerous, I want to suggest, is the insanity that it brings at a far more wider and pervasive level. The grief that comes from loved ones dying, or the grief that comes from the observing of people who are grieving, does something to the collective. I will even argue whether we know it or not. It seems to do something that it twists and contorts our ability to see reality in the way that reality is supposed to be seen. One of the things that you've just said is that it creates a situation where we become suspicious of each other, of the packages, the bodies that we are manifest in. And that almost exacerbates the cycle, because it invites yet another moment of death, of unlivening, of more grief. And it almost feels as though as high as joy and all of the positive feelings one can think of are, and the fact that that is something that is unending if you're going the other direction up, it almost feels like going down is also got the same quality, that it doesn't have an end. It's an abyss of more and more darkness. And I just feel like that darkness is no longer contained somewhere. It's spilled over into the space that we are in, into our consciousness. Care to talk about that?
Yes, that speaks to the three levels of existence that are manifest. It's described that we're influenced by goodness. So when someone hears something about death in the mode of goodness, they see the opportunity to question that what is the ultimate value of living. People influenced by the mode of passion, when they hear about death, they think, hey, one life to live, let me enjoy now before this death comes. People influenced by the mode of darkness, ignorance, when they hear that, they feel a sense of paranoia, helplessness, and they act without any calculation because of fear of it may come, it may come. So as you were saying, the more we see death and we don't understand that death is stepping out of this one room apartment that you were renting, potentially to move to like a beach house if you've prepared for that. We think it's the beginning and the end, birth and death, when actually, no, life is eternal. So the darkness and when the grief is so overwhelming, there's a lack of the light of knowledge there. So we want to honor that that's the case, and we see that people do grieve because it is natural. Even in so-called enlightened circles, we see, for example, in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna and his friend Arjuna loses 2 sons in this big war of Mahabharata. And we see that Krishna is the supreme person. He comes to hug his friend, console him. In fact, he sheds tears along with him, because there is, without saying maybe an attachment to the bodily relationship, there's also an emotional investment in that relationship. And when it is severed, naturally we feel at a loss. How will we...
Even for Krishna?
Even for Krishna.
Even for Jesus? I mean, the shortest scripture we're told in the Bible is, and Jesus wept. And
Yeah.
it was at the moment of the mortality of a friend, right? And that has always been a thing for me. Because the concepts about what death is in the greater scheme of things, about how it is really a precursor to the next experience of the eternity of life, is not a new idea at all. We find it in African ways of African cosmology. We find it everywhere, right? So it's not strange to me. But it is strange to me that those enlightened beings, right, Krishna, Jesus, Muhammad, all of those people, at the moment of death have all also expressed grief.
Yes.
And my question, and maybe it's a dumb question, you're enlightened, bro.
What kind?
What's going on here? You are enlightened and yet you feel grief, and when you know that death is an introduction to the next skala, stage of the eternity of life. Why? Why does a Jesus weep? Why does a Krishna weep with his friend who's lost his child, when he knows that life is eternal? Why does he weep? Why the grief? Surely it should be a celebration.
Yes. So there we are being exposed that actually the emotions that are there within a relationship are actually the juice of life. That is where we experience, you could say, true connection.
Yeah.
So the whole scope, whether it's joy, it's grief, laughter, horror, whatever it may be, is a reality of relationships. For example, Krishna tells Arjuna, who doesn't want to fight in the war in the beginning, who's lamenting that my friends, my relatives, my teachers will be killed in this war. He says that you are lamenting for that which is not worthy of grief. The wise, they don't grieve either for the living or for the dead. So it seems like harsh. Don't lament. But the distinction is that grief and lamentation are different. Lamentation means you are stuck in the past actions in the present. Why did that happen? Why did I lose? And then instead of So you can express your feelings, emotions, that is good. If you repress them, that is not good. But simply expressing and lamenting without coming to processing what has happened. Processing then will lead to healing and understanding. So when we lament only, then we're stuck in ignorance, because we don't process that the soul, that spiritual being, there's no death for them, and that whatever has taken birth must die. So that wisdom would then help you to start thinking, oh, they are eternal, they are connected to the Supreme. So then what can I do also to enhance their onward journey? What have they done to influence me while we had the relationship that I can honor and use to move on, to make them proud? So lamentation is sometimes mistaken for grief, whereas grief is a natural flow of the emotions due to separation of a dear relationship, a meaningful relationship.
Savyasachi Das Prabhu. Oh, I'm fun. I love it. I love it. Give me a call, by the way, 011-883-0702. And modern culture seems not to have the words, the concepts that lead us to the understanding of the difference between lamentation and grief. Older societies understood this well. That's why you have different traditions. Krishna, the Christian, ancient African wisdoms, the people of the Americas, the Aztecs, all have a narrative about how to process the feelings post-death. Modern society seems not to have that. Added to that is our ability to move information very quickly, very ubiquitously. So it's almost as if our ignorance is able to move faster. To what extent does that then make this lamentation, that's beautiful, this lamentation process even heavier? I mean, the conversation about the three constables that have died, the constant conversation about the death of farmers that and just friends of mine in the Afrikaner community that I'm constantly talking about, and the grief and the lamentation that you see now that we are actually really looking at this situation, the grief and the pain of people that lose their loved ones because some criminals came and killed them while they were patrolling, and you sit with those people. The grief and lamentation of a mother who's lost a son at a initiation school, who can't reconcile her faith in the culture and how that same faith in the culture is responsible for taking her only son. I've sat with people and tried to console and tried to listen and hear. And at each and every moment that I've sat with those people in trying to connect with that human aspect of deep sorrow, pain and grief, yes, and very often lamentation, there are no words. There simply are no words to say to anybody that is in that space. And very often those that are in that lamentation space, not just the grief space, do some of the most crazy stuff. A guy killed his own baby because the baby was crying.
Yes.
Even raped the baby, something strange like that. But there was a story of lamentation around it. People will resort to all sorts of very, very, very counterproductive behaviors in that moment of lamentation. And I have searched the open skies to find words to say to somebody in that space, there seems to be none.
Yes, it's true, because see, emotions, they have the greatest impact on our consciousness. There's the rationale. That's why philosophy is important. How to make sense of life. And generally when life gives us some curveballs, that's when we stop to ask, what am I supposed to do now? Generally we're stuck in just our routines. And so we don't try to understand what is the cause of what and how life moves. So we've given first like how to understand what's going on. And then when we come to the practical, how to console, how to deal with someone grieving or lamenting, as you have rightly pointed out, it's a game of giving an ear. It's a game of
Humble presence.
humble presence, yes, validating those feelings, giving people the space to know that your grief is unique. You don't have to follow some step. You have a right to act out in certain ways, and allowing them to heal.
One of my best friends just lost his wife. And to cancer. And there was this disbelief in this disbelief of the reality and the finality of the fact that his wife is no more. And those of us who love him and loved his wife, loved them as a family, wanted to coalesce and be around them. And you hear people wanting to say a word, and it almost seems to me like it's almost wrong. While the intention is right, but it almost feels futile. Not wrong in the militant sense of the word wrong, right? I'm not saying, but it almost feels like it's just not gonna hit the mark. Right? So,
what are we gonna do?
So the best thing is to be quiet. What do you advise us to do when somebody is in a moment of deep grief and maybe even lamentation? Because I have discovered that words don't help. Yes. Sometimes they try to help or try to be logical and rational. But this thing is not a rational thing. The loss of a loved one is not a rational thing. How do we approach it?
I actually looked up this the do's and don'ts of trying to.
Are there protocols on it?
Yeah. People have done like good studies in the secular world. I'll just look at what. So you do listen attentively. That is helpful. But don't be afraid of strong emotions, because now you have to hold space. This person may have outbursts which are natural. So if you're going to be there, hold that space without being afraid, and don't change the subject to start trying to tell your own story of loss, maybe.
Yes.
to words. I understand what you're going through.
Because you don't, right?
Because you don't, yeah. And it's their situation.
Yes,
it's so uniquely theirs.
Yeah.
Things like validate the enormity of their loss.
At the level of their subjective experience of that thing.
Yes, don't try to trim
to say, but somebody else also went through the same thing that you did and they didn't cry as much as you.
You're stronger than this. You
Yes.
can get over the,
Yes.
these types of ways. Is we're totally for you and are ready to accept however your grief or your lamentation shows up. And it's uncomfortable, like you said.
Yeah. I want to take some calls. So 1188307002. It feels to me as we talk about this as Buddha that it's also a great opportunity for us to connect at a non-verbal level as human beings. Yes?
Yes.
I want us to talk a little bit about that. But Mariah is here. Mariah, good evening to you. Hello, Mariah. Oh, I've just lost Mariah. Usintate, please connect us again with Mariah. I suppose because of our collective lack of wisdom sometimes at that moment, and the need to do something, we usually do something that is probably inappropriate. That's the word, inappropriate at that time. We'll say something that means well, but that is not appropriate for that moment. But my sense is that is a moment for us to connect at a non-verbal level as human beings, instead of trying to rationalize and all of those inappropriate moments. Talk to me about that.
I mean, in common parlance, vibes. It's about
Yes.
vibes, Aubrey. At that space where the words can't do the job, then simply by your state of heart, by your well wishes, by your sense of comforting the person, that can be conveyed. Your thoughts are also a vibration. It's a certain way of communicating. Sometimes we complete each other's sentences and you wonder, hey, you just took it out of my mouth, those words. So that holding space and offering the heart's meditation can be of great value. And you find that sometimes even in the company of elevated persons or important people, there can be this need to let us converse, but then by doing that you spoil the frequencies.
It becomes inappropriate.
It becomes, yes, that word was, yes.
Let's speak to Mariah in Rivonia. Good evening to you, Mariah. I'm well. I'm very well, thank you.
And the one is
Yeah. He was commiserating with her grief and her pain. Yeah, yeah. Thanks very much, Mariah. Buddha?
Sometimes it's just we have the wrong understanding of where we are, and we have the wrong expectation. You know, I've taken the trouble to take birth here. I'm owed a smooth life and everything's peaches and cream. Whereas if you would ask, you'd know you've taken birth in a correctional facility, the place of birth, death, old age, and diseases, where everyone has to pay for their karmic debt. And that debt is guaranteed for everyone, and no one knows the time or the hour. So when we simply just paint the world with all sorts of optimism in terms of smooth sailing, then we disappoint ourselves when we bump into the reality of the place we're in. But because we're entitled, we are also spoiled. We want to blame. And so who's the biggest, who created this place, then we blame them. But we don't find out why was this place created with such parameters. We don't ask for the user manual. And it's unfortunate, and it's actually pandemic status there, where people are so heartbroken and they feel so outdone, and they cannot believe that a merciful, loving God who is all-knowing knew this would happen and allowed it to happen.
Yeah.
Yes. Whereas here we've been put in a place where we're given some slight free will, but the situation we're in is that the actions of ourselves and others will create certain reactions, all of which to stimulate an understanding that this is not the place where I want to be because of so many sufferings. And the question should be, because I want no suffering, I want an endless joy and love, then where should I go? What should I do? And God has made so many plans to answer those actual human questions. Who am I? Where am I? Where will I go after death? There's enough in all cultures to start taking you to a higher consciousness. But because of being spoiled and entitled, then we just take our toys and run into a corner and we're angry. God hates me.
I recently watched a movie, relatively older movie. I think it's called Collateral Beauty. And the leading actor there is Will Smith and Kate Winslet and Norton. I think it's somebody, not William, somebody, can't remember. But it is precisely about how a father who loses his 6-year-old daughter to a very, very rare disease goes through grief, and how his friends enlist the services of actors who, in his moment of twilight consciousness, because he's here and there at the same time, act as though they are love, time, and another. Yeah. So he has conversations with love. He has conversations with time, and he has conversations with death. So death, love, time are personified. They are given human qualities. And the time is a young black guy. He's a young black guy, like young black guys are, slick like that, right? And he's sassy like that. And death is this older, wiser woman, and love is this beautiful young woman, very vulnerable, and yet possesses the biggest power in that triumvirate of. And for me, it was such a powerful movie, in that it gave me the required concepts to be able to taxonomize in my mind what it is that we're talking about. And you did a brilliant job tonight by saying, remember, we're not just talking about grief, we're talking about lamentation too. I want to talk about what is the opportunity that is presented to us by death, grief, and lamentation at the level of the purpose of life. What is the opportunity that is being presented by that? I want to take the call from Stelo. Stelo in Centurion. Hi, Stelo. Very good, thanks, man. Go ahead. What's on your mind? He's something, bro. He's something. He's gonna be ordained on Sunday, by the way. Yeah, he's gonna be a big mfundisi somewhere there. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Yes.
Very valid question.
Yes.
Very valid question, and I get why it feels awkward, Stella. Yeah? So it's but it's a very valid question. Spuda?
Yes, thank you for those questions, and I appreciate your thoughtfulness on the subject. Yes, life is a continuum. This death concept is in relation to the embodiment, because the embodiment is always made of a different substance, matter. It manifests at some point, it's maintained for some time, and then it unmanifests. So death just means the soul departs the particular body. But that life force is always living. By its very nature, it's an eternal being. So a good death and a bad death will be if you die like a cat and a dog, not knowing about your spiritual identity or any higher aspiration. They're also going through sex, food, their friends and relatives, but they have no higher understanding. They eat, they sleep, they mate, they defend. So if a human being dies in the consciousness of an animal, that's a bad death, because all that will happen is that their consciousness, their karmic activity will accrue and give them another birth in a level of life that is not elevated. Good death would be one has made strides in elevating their consciousness. So they are getting closer to uniting with the Supreme Person. So best death would be self-realized. Then you are simply, death is just like a vehicle ushering you into the arms of the beloved. It's not an inconvenience, in fact, it's a luxury. Thank you. Let me again continue in my eternal body, which is not disturbed by time.
Warrior cultures, the Vikings, samurai, Amabutho, KwaZulu, will speak of good deaths and bad deaths. Usually it's part of the ethos and the mentality of the warrior culture.
Yeah.
That I want a good death. Usually the good death means I want to die with my blood boiling in the heat of battle. And I want to die with the entry of a blade in me, a cold blade in me. It's considered the highest and the most desired of deaths amongst warrior cultures. And as Telo was asking that question, you'll hear it also amongst people that have a missionary sort of calling. That will say that I want to die in the midst of my spiritual calling. That is my good death. So for somebody like you, for example, who says that I am now entering a phase where I'm giving everything to the cause, and I want to die in that space, that is a good death. That is the ultimate good death. It brings me back to the question that I want to end our conversation, that says, does this conversation suggest that we've got to enter our own warrior phase in the highest form of that concept? Is that the opportunity here? What is the opportunity that the presence of death, grieving and lamentation provides to us at this juncture of time?
Yeah, we have to dig deep and look at the wisdom, collective wisdom of humanity. And you will find there that it's been all codified to understand if you are mercantile class business, how do you do business successfully? You're a warrior. What is the success of a warrior? You are a spiritualist. What's the success of a spiritualist? So we have a chance now to understand that as a human being, you can get whatever destination you desire if you focus on it and you know the science of it. We are now sort of haphazardly living our lives, just informed by the trends and whatever we watch and hear from our friends.
Our base desires, probably.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the opportunity is to get genuine wisdom and live our lives following scientific, tried and tested wisdoms.
I know that the next time I see you, I'm going to be calling you Maharaj, right? And of course, the ordained name that you have been given. I want to say to you that for the few years that you and I have been having conversations about various aspects of life, spirituality, the divine, the mundane, it has been an absolute revelation for me. And I think if you can be given a discount for the work that you've been doing, and somebody is to be asked to stand as a witness of whether or not you are deserving of that discount, I will be amongst those that stand up and say, no, I know this man. He's done well. And so I want to say to you that as you enter this phase of your calling, may you be blessed, may you continue to be a blessing. May you continue to provide us with deep wisdom. May you continue to be a proud servant of the calling that you've been given. Buddha, thank you, my brother. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you so much for me.
It's 10 o'clock. Time for Eyewitness News. What a time. What a time.